Hello. Um, so I have been, you can watch this if you can see this cat. She's going to burrow into this blanket, I think. Anyway, um, I have been not doing much for a few months as I try to, I've been trying to give myself enough of a break. Well, originally I was trying to give myself a break so that I could have feel refreshed and have resources to make more things again. And I have found that mostly instead I've been just processing a lot of personal emotional stuff going way back, and then of course also when I try to catch up with the present day and figure out my place in it, that's also extremely difficult and overwhelming as well. So I, you know, have gone to, not that I have done nothing, but it's a lot. So, and the only thing right now that has been making me feel like a person is reading. So I thought I would just start doing short vlogs, I guess, which feels like it's a word that's a decade or two out of date, but I think we still use. Anyway, and tell you about some of the things I've been reading. First off is a kind of seasonal book. It's called Spirits Abroad by Zun Cho. And she is, I believe, of Chinese Malaysian descent and grew up in Malaysia, and then has spent time definitely studying and working in the UK and maybe elsewhere. But this is a series of short stories. I'm most of the way through, but still have some left. They're split up in between. The contents are here, there, and elsewhere. So first, here is in Malaysia. There are stories of spirits and interacting with the supernatural, I guess, and sometimes from the point of view of regular humans, and sometimes from the point of view of humans who have become supernatural, who have died one way or another and are still interacting with the world. And I've found it just, it's been lovely. She does a lot of, they're very personal and accessible stories, where these individual, there's one story about a vampire, not a Western vampire, Malaysian vampire. So the rules are different, who lives with all her vampire aunties, but still they still make her go to school, and she has a crush on a boy, and but she's dealing with how dealing with how she fits into the world and how she'll continue to fit into the world, because she and her aunties are there. It's lovely. And then the one I just finished was called Prudence and the Dragon, about that's in the there part, so away from Malaysia. So in the UK, a dragon, there's a dragon that visits the UK every couple hundred years and takes a maiden back to the dragon realm, and he so it's about the young woman that he chooses, and all the kind of the layers of society and people, and kind of struggling to understand, not because she's not intelligent or not paying attention, but just because she's living her own life and other things, doesn't necessarily pay attention to the news. So she wasn't. Everybody else in the UK was aware of the dragon before she was. Um, anyway, it's a good, yeah, good little, yeah, sweet little stories. Um, another book that I usually have a pile of at least 2 or 3 books, and I try to, I've gotten into short stories in the last few years because it's nice, I sit down in the morning and read a short story, and then I can put that book down. That's a good kind of cutting off point for me to feel like I finished something and can move on with my day. Anyway, I usually have a mix of fiction and nonfiction, and I've been reading Moby Dick, which kind of defies that line a lot of the time. And I've been really enjoying it, though I have been skimming some of the whaling history chapters. Not all of them. A lot of them, it's really interesting. Sometimes it's a little much, but I am glad, I'm glad that Herman Melville wrote it. I have been enjoying it a lot. I wasn't sure how I would feel about it. I'd heard a few nerdy people whose judgment I respect had said they really liked it, so I was hoping that I would like it as well, and I do. I think it's really interesting. It starts out with a bunch of extracts is what the chapter is called, where Herman Melville just found every reference to whales he could in all the books around him, which I think is fun if you're in the right mood for it. And then we hear about Ishmael and the brain that he's dealing with, and how, he yes, he says, whenever I find myself growing grim about the mouth, whenever it is a damp, drizzly November in my soul. And he goes on, whenever he's in a slump, he goes and finds a whaling ship to join, which is something, this edition of the book that I got, I think all these books are from the Des Moines Public Library, and I just highly recommend joining a public library. It's always one of the first things I do when I move to a new place. But this edition has a nice chronology of Herman Melville's life. So I learned that he did actually work on ships, on whaling ships. So he's writing his Ishmael is in many ways him, I think. And then definitely the passages that are just, the chapters that are just about, this is how whaling works, this is how the whaling ship works, are definitely from Herman Melville's experience. And he's been, I don't know, like, he was a person also in that chronology. I learned it's just, a brief overview of his life, but he's struggling, like, if he was alive right now, would probably be diagnosed with some kind of mental illness, where it seems like he was dealing with depressive episodes for one reason or another, where, there could be a lot of other things. And thinking about that with past people always makes me think about also, something I've been thinking about for myself is that I'm in the working hypothesis right now, seeing how my life goes, but assuming that I have autism, that I am autistic, and have been in autistic burnout for years, because that is the best explanation for how little and how the way that I've been able to function, and why I can't also can't seem to, like, building momentum doesn't really seem to be a thing for me at the moment, because I just have really limited reserves. Anyway, but so thinking about that for myself, and thinking about, whatever Herman Melville was dealing with, is that, like, some, like when we talk about neurodivergent versus neurotypical, sometimes we're talking about pretty tangible things, pretty tangible different. There are tangible differences in how brains work, but then also sometimes neurotypical means like societally expected, or yeah, social expectations, which does not necessarily describe any actual brain, right? It just means that some people are going to be able to fit into that better than others. And but maybe it's not actually good for anyone, you know. um anyway, so yeah, so Herman Melville like talked about how his wife's family, you know, he got married relatively young, I think, and had kids, but his wife's family really didn't like him and thought that he was mad, so some kind of insane, and wanted her to, at least some of them, it just says her family in this, but wanted her to divorce him. um, yeah. So, and I don't know, he talks a lot. He does a lot of talking about, um, yeah. So, like in one chapter, he had been talking. It was one of the boring chapters, I think, where he's just talking about Brit, which is this yellow something like microorganism something. I didn't actually look that up, but that is just kind of like a yellow film field over the top that other kinds of whales, not the spermaceti whale that they're looking for, but other kinds of whales eat. And it's just this, and yeah, so talking about how the land, you know, it looks like a landscape, and talking about the ocean, like the hugeness and the unknowableness of the ocean. And he ends that chapter, he says, so, and how, saying how it's the same, inside of all of us. So in the soul of man there lies one insular Tahiti, full of peace and joy, but encompassed by all the horrors of the half-known life. God keep thee, push not off from that isle, thou canst never return! Exclamation point. So about how we're on this, you know, every person is on this happy little like island of self, but if you push off farther into the away from that center, you'll be lost in, I don't know what you might call your unconscious or the unknown, all these unknown parts of self. So and again, that's just written as in the narrator's voice. So Ishmael, but in a, like our narrator, but in a boring chapter, like excuse me, in an information chapter. So I think that's really Herman Melville telling us what he thinks about the world, and how he experiences, I think, a pretty delicate balance between being able to function and feeling very adrift and untethered, which I have a lot of sympathy for. Yeah. So, and it is, I feel like you have to say, like, the beginning, it starts out where it's just kind of this beautiful, weird, but kind of beautiful interaction where he meets Queequeg, who is the indigenous from somewhere in Polynesia, I think from a made up place, but indigenous harpooner that Ishmael meets at where they both stay in the same place, end up staying in the same room overnight, where it feels very much like a white man in a white supremacist society making an earnest attempt to connect with the humanity of someone not white and not from his society. Like the description of it feels that way. And Herman Melville did live in some other indigenous communities for at least months, if not years. I think just months, while he was doing some of that whaling. But it is, I don't know, it's the kind of thing where I'm just very glad that he wrote it and recorded all of this, because it does feel, yeah, it feels like something he's wading through a lot of the time. Anyway, Herman Melville, lots of interior exploration of self and trying to connect with other people still in a racist society, and like from a racist the point of view of someone in a racist society. So yeah, recording, doing his best, I think, to record truth from the perspective he was in, but also his perspective is in some ways limited by being in a race, like part of a racist society, and that's just how that goes. But I've been making. I had to put it aside. I got stuck for a while, but I'm making progress again, and then maybe I'll finish it relatively soon. And then one other. This is a big plug for public libraries because I found this just walking around. I've been putting things on hold, especially when they're only available in other branches than the one I can get to easily on the bus. But I've been picking up holds and then walking around. So this is this very shiny, cool book in Gothic fantasy is the larger series, and this one is Black Sci-Fi short stories. I've only read 2 of these. It looks like I lost my bookmark, but one was a modern story, and the second one was called The Comet by W.E.B. Du Bois. And yeah, it's good stuff, and I highly recommend wandering around a library and seeing what catches your eye. But yeah, so I will check back in soon. I was trying to do 10 or 15 minutes. I've done a little bit more than that. Yeah, so I'll check back in soon about maybe some of these books and maybe some of the other books that are in the pile that I shuffle around in when I sit down to read. So thank you.